Some of you may find this very simplistic, but to get started, I need to open up Excel. To open up Excel, I need to click on the Start button, and I can either come up here, and if I recently opened up the program, it'll be listed there, but if not, I can click in this instant search field and type in Excel, and then come up here, if it is on my computer, and then just go ahead and click on it, and it'll open up. The only problem is if I close out of it, then I have to do the whole thing over again, or just click on Start and go to Excel. Better yet, instead of doing that, I'm going to go ahead and right-click it while it's there. And you can also come down in here and do your Excel search again and come up to your results and right-click on that as well. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to send it to the desktop as a shortcut. So when I hover over Send To and I go to Desktop, Create Shortcut, when I click on it, it's going to create a shortcut of Excel on my desktop. Now, I don't see it here because it's hiding behind my menu here. Click off in a blank area, there it is. So I can go ahead and double click and it'll open up Excel. But better yet, I also have it created as a shortcut down here on my Quick Launch toolbar. Now all these things I'm talking about are basic Windows Vista operations. And you can learn more about this by watching the Windows Vista Level 1 training video. But quickly, the difference between the shortcut here and the shortcut down on my Quick Launch toolbar is that all I have to do is click once on here to open it up, versus when I close out of here, double clicking. So a single click is a lot easier for me, so I can do it either way. Before we start working down here in our spreadsheet, I want to cover the layout of Excel 2007. Now for those of you who have used previous versions of Excel or coming from 2003 XP or older versions, you're going to see a major difference here. First of all, let's go over the layout. In the upper left hand corner they have the Office logo button. When you click on it, it gives you a menu. You can create new workbooks, open up other saved workbooks, or save your current workbook that you're in, and you can also print and so on. I'm going to click off in a blank area to collapse the menu. Next to it is this little teeny tiny toolbar that is customizable. In fact, it's the only toolbar that you have access to and that you can customize. The reason why it's called the Quick Access Toolbar, or QAT, is because you can quickly execute commands by adding buttons to the toolbar and clicking on them. Like here you go, I have the Save button. When I click on it, it'll actually save the workbook. I can also add print buttons and other buttons to it and remove them from the Quick Access Toolbar as well. Over to the right here in center is the title of your workbook. Currently it's Book 1. Anytime you open up a new workbook, it's going to give you some generic name until you actually save it. Once you save it and give it a name, then of course it's going to be the name you gave it, and it's not going to be this generic Book 1 or Book 2 or Book 3 and so forth. Over to the right, if you watch the Windows Vista Level 1 training video, you'll understand that you have three buttons here: Minimize, Restore, Down, and Close. Also, below that you can see almost the same buttons: Close, Restore, Down, and Minimize. The difference is that if you click the outer X here, it closes the whole program. For example, I click on it, closes it, right? So I'm going to open it up by double clicking on Excel here. Then you have an inner X. If you close the inner X, it just closes the window or the workbook, but it leaves the Excel program still open up at the top, so I can go ahead and click the Office logo button, click New, double click on Blank Workbook, and I of course get a new workbook. Notice up in the title bar here where it says Book 2, because I left the program open and I created a new workbook, it's going to name it Workbook 2, and if I close that again and open up a new workbook, it'll be Book 3 until I actually give it a name. In any case, you want to keep that in mind. Outer X closes the whole program, inner X just closes that workbook, or that inner window, not the whole program. Now over to the left hand side here, they have what Excel calls a ribbon, this huge thing right here. You think of it as a toolbar, but the geeky term or the new terminology is ribbon. And on that ribbon they have different tabs. You can see all the titles up at the top when I hover over them. It looks like it outlines as a tab. So for example, when I click on Page Layout, it now solidifies, showing that I'm on the active Page Layout tab here versus going back to Home tab, which is now active. And then the Page Layout disappears. Now on each tab, within the tabs, most of them will have what are called groups. So for example, I'm looking at my font group here, this little section right here, and that deals basically with your fonts. If you want to change the font type for Calibri, which by the way is a new type of font in Excel 2007, you can change it to Times New Roman, Arial, and we'll do more of this in later training videos. You can make the font bold, italics, underline, you can color the font, you can color the cell down below, the whole cell, by clicking on the paint bucket, and that's the group. You also have the alignment group, how you want to align the numbers within the cell. And then of course the number formatting if you want it in dollar signs as a percent and so forth. Now you probably already noticed, but in each group, or some of the groups, they have a little tiny button. It's called the expandable dialog box button. I just call it the expand button, and all that means is that this group doesn't have everything that you see here. It has more when you click on the expandable dialog box button. So down here I can do a little bit more than what I can see up here. In fact, some of the features you see here you can do the same thing down in this expandable dialog box or this new screen here. For example, you can see it's Calibri. I can change it here to any other type of font that I want, but I can also do that by clicking on the arrow here, right? There's more than one way to do things, but usually when you click on the expandable dialog box, it gives you more details than you would find within the group here. So I'm going to go ahead and click Cancel. Short little history lesson is the reason why Microsoft went this way instead of with menus. This whole visual ribbon is to let people know that there's more in Microsoft Excel that they can use by putting it all out in front of them. Of course, they do have the expandable dialog box buttons, but basically in each group you're going to get the meat and potatoes of it. If you want to get more detailed and more refined as you go along, then you can expand that and do a little bit more. Down below they have the name box that lets you know which cell you're in. So if I click in another cell, E5, you can see that the column E is in orange and the row 5, and it tells me I'm in E5. They have the formula bar that will display what's in the cell, and we'll go over that more in detail. And then below you actually have the spreadsheet. But before I start getting into the spreadsheet, I'm going to come down to the bottom here and the edge of the window frame of Excel here, and it's called the status bar. And the reason why is because as I enter in numbers in these cells and as I select certain cells, you're going to see different stats down below. For example, if I right click anywhere on the status bar, I have several options that are already defaulted for me, and I can check others. Like for example, when I select a bunch of cells, it'll automatically pull down here on the stat bar the average of those cells. And like I said, we'll cover a lot of this in future training videos, but for right now we're just getting the layout. And then over to the right hand side, I'll click off in a blank area anywhere here just so I can collapse that menu. Over to the right hand side you have the zoom feature that you can zoom in and out of your spreadsheet, and also different views. Normal view, page layout view, and page break preview. And then of course you have your scrolly bars to scroll left or right or up and down in your spreadsheet. The two main uses for Excel can either be to store or create a database in Excel. As you can see here, you got the columns. You can have first name, last name, their address, phone number, and this is usually for small businesses. Now if you're a medium-sized business with tens of thousands of people or data you want to keep track of in a database, I recommend using Microsoft's Access. And if you're a large business, maybe millions, that you want to keep track of, there's other software. The main purpose of Access is to be able to do calculations anywhere from simple adding, addition, multiplications to complex. And I'm going to show you both in these training videos, and we'll get started in level 1. But before we do, we want to learn how to navigate around Excel. First of all, you can use your mouse to click on any cell, right? You can also use your arrow keys on the keyboard to go up or down or left or right. Additionally, you can hit the Tab key to go to the right, or hold down the Shift key and hit Tab and go back to the left. To get back to the beginning of your worksheet here, just hit Control Home, the Control key on your keyboard, and hit the Home key, usually to the right side of your keyboard. It'll take you back to A1. If you want to find out the maximum number of columns in Excel 2007 and the maximum amount of rows, instead of scrolling over forever, because you got your scroll bars here, right, you can just keep clicking and clicking, and you can see now I'm in the T column, or keep scrolling down. Instead, just click somewhere in your spreadsheet, hit the End key, not the letter N, but E-N-D, the End key. It's below the Home key. Hit it once, and then hit the down arrow key on the keyboard, and it'll take you all the way down to, it looks like, about the millionth row. Also hit the End key and hit the right arrow key, and it'll take you over to the last column here, which is XFD. So think of it this way. There's a lot of columns and a lot of rows. I mean, once it's finished with the alphabet, A, B, C, D, all the way down to Z, then it picks up again with each column going AA, AB, all the way down to XFD. And that can be your homework. Count up how many columns are in Excel. To get back to A1, think of it this way first. If you go down and right, you're going to end up finally in this last cell here, which is column XFD, 1,048,576 row. But if you go up and left far enough, you're going to go back to the beginning, which is A1, or just hit Control Home, and I'm back to where I started. You can also hit the page down key. The moment I hit it, I'm no longer in row 1, I'm in row 26, and I can keep paging down, and I can page up. Now if I want to page over to the right, then just hold down the Alt key and hit the page down, and I go from the A column over to the P, Alt page down, and then Alt page up to keep paging to the left, so you can page up and down or left or right. Now if you have numerous cells that you want to change the formatting for, like let's say cell C5 here, and you can see that when I'm in column C, row 5, the name box here tells me that I'm in C5. And I can come over here in F9. So let's say I have some text in F9 or some numbers, and also in D5 and various other cells. If I want to go ahead and format them, change the format so they all have a $sign, selecting them one at a time and then clicking on the $sign can be very annoying. What you can do is you can click on the one cell, hold down the Control key, and with the Control key held down you can click on numerous cells. You can see that I have right now where it's highlighted in orange on the column here and on the rows. And you can see the faded light blue boxes. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 total cells, including this white one, which is the one I'm currently in, selected. Then all I have to do is hit the $sign or hit color the text or font within there with red, or dump and color yellow, and it automatically fills up all those cells. Now if I made a mistake, remember in the upper left hand corner in your quick access toolbar you have the undo arrow that'll undo what you did. And then of course you can always redo what you did or undo, and click off in a blank area to deselect all of it. For bulk selection, getting a little bit spiffier now, is of course you can click and hold down the control key and click other cells, but you can also, while holding down the control key, click and drag. So you can see, click and drag, click, click and drag. I've got the control key held down this whole time. Now I let go of it, and I'll click off in a blank area. You can also click and drag in a range here, and that will select this block range just by holding it down. Now when you're clicking and dragging, keep in mind there's 3 different ways to do this. When you click and drag, notice my little mouse, it's actually a white cross and I'm moving around. Anytime you get that, you're free to select cells. If I move to the border, you see how it becomes a 4-way black arrow and not the white cross. Huge difference. If you use the black arrow and you click and drag, it's actually going to move that whole range. And we'll cover that more in moving data around later. So you just don't want to willy-nilly just start clicking and dragging things. You want to pay special attention to what your cursor is looking like. So for example, if I want to select this range here, anywhere I've got a white cross, if I click and drag, I'm okay, it's selecting. But anywhere after I select, if I get a black cross, you're actually going to be moving the data around. Or in the lower right hand corner, if you get a black cross, you're actually using the AutoFill handle. So actually 3 different crosses or arrows. You have the black cross, you have the border 4-way arrow, and then you have the center or the selection white cross. So just for selecting, you want to make sure you got your white cross and you're free to click and drag to select cells. I'm going to click up here in A1 and let's say I want to do block selection. I don't want to click and drag forever here. What I can do, I'm going to click back in A1, is hold down the Shift key. When I hold down the Shift key and I click in cell, let's say K19, you see automatically just boom, selects it right to that point where I clicked by holding down my Shift key. That works too. And then if I hold down my Control key and I start clicking and dragging, see I've got my block selection, and I also have, using the control key, extra selections by clicking or clicking and dragging, and then click off in a blank area and it disappears. If you want to select the whole worksheet, you can click on this button in the upper left hand corner, selects the whole worksheet, click off in a blank area. In previous versions of Excel you could hit Control A and it would select the whole worksheet. It still does, however, if you have data, numbers here, and you click in one of those fields that has data or numbers, it'll just select the area around it, not the whole worksheet. You always want to click off in a blank cell in the worksheet and hit Control A to select the whole worksheet. Again, that's Control A. Click off in a blank area. If you want to select a column, go ahead and click on the column header D and it selects the whole column. See how that black arrow pointed down? By the same token, if you go over to the left hand side and click 8 and you see the arrow pointing to the right, it selects the whole row. Hold down the Control key and I can click on the column and I get crosshairs. Again, using the control key you can select multiple columns, rows, ranges, cells, and a range is nothing more than just 2 or more cells. So for example, if I click in cell E5 and I drag over to F5, that's a range from E5 to F5 versus just a single cell. If you type in anything in a cell, and you see how my cursor's flashing, if I hit enter it solidifies, right? Now if I need to make any changes in that cell, I can do it one of 2 ways. I can click on the cell and come up here in the formula and select, hit the backspace or just typing more numbers, the formula bar, and then when I'm finished hit enter. That works. Or you can select the cell and then double click and it dumps your cursor right back in there, doesn't it? Then within that cell, not up here, but within the cell you can hit backspace, type in some more numbers and hit enter. That works. If you ever find yourself double clicking in a cell and you start clicking outside of it and it won't let you go, and it still is trying to add other cells, in other words, if it gets too hard and you can't leave the cell, you can't get out of it, always hit escape. If you hit escape in the upper left hand corner of your keyboard, it'll pull you out of the cell. So double click to get in the cell, hit escape, pulls me out. One last thing before we go is down at the bottom you have your different worksheets. Now all these worksheets here make up the complete workbook. The quick access toolbar is this little faded area here that already has a few buttons on it. Yours probably just has the save button. When you hover over it gives you the save and the shortcut Control S. And also the undo and redo buttons. So if you make a mistake you can always undo it, and if you need to redo your mistake you can always redo it. I also have the save as. Now the whole purpose of the Quick Access Toolbar again is to be able to quickly access features or execute commands. So for example, I have my Save button here, right? Before I click on Save, notice the title of my workbook is Book 1. That's a generic title. Anytime I open up Excel, it's going to give me Book 1. Now it'll always be Book 1 until I actually save it. Now I can go ahead and click Save, and when I save it, it's going to ask me two questions. Where do you want to save this workbook, and what name do you want to give it? So I go ahead and click the Save button. It brings up the window, and it performs a Save As. You see, the thing is that instead of doing Save, anytime you save something for the first time, like you see up here, it has no title. It's going to ask you where do you want to put it, and here's the window. Do I want to put it in the Custom Callouts folder, in the Documents folder, Training folder, User folder? See the different levels there? And what name do I want to give it? So what you can do is you can browse through your computer by clicking on the desktop, double-clicking on folders, find a spot that you want to save your workbook, give it a name, and click Save. So I can go Desktop, and I recommend that until you're used to Windows Vista, usually clicking on the desktop and saving it to your desktop and giving it a generic name. Call it My Workbook, whatever name you want to give it. And then when you're finished, go ahead and click Save, and it does two things. First of all, it saves the workbook as the name that you gave it, generic name, and then it's also saved in your desktop. So if I come up here and I click on the Minimize button, there it is, generic workbook. So it's saved on my desktop. So I'm going to come down here on the taskbar and click on the button Microsoft Excel so I can maximize it again, and back up to the Quick Access Toolbar. So now that I saved it, I can make any changes that I want, type in whatever I want in any cell, make calculations, anything, and then when I'm finished I can click the Save button. Now it's not going to pull back up and ask me what name I want to give it or where I want to save it, because we did that the first time. It knows now, and we gave it the commands. So anytime I close out of this and then I come back to my desktop and double click on that workbook, it saved everything, and it didn't ask me again where do I want to save it or what I want to save it as. So again, the first time you save any new workbook that you open up, it's going to ask you those two questions. Second of all, once you open it up and you want to create copies, you can pull up the Save As feature again. For example, clicking on the Office logo button, coming down to Save As, and you can click on Save As right here. And again, that will ask you where do you want to put this workbook and what name do you want to give it. If it's the same name and you click Save, it'll say, look, do you want to replace the one that you already have on your desktop? No. So maybe I want to give it a new name and just click Save, so I have two different copies. I have my generic name, and then I have my, let's click in here and call it generic name 2, and click Save, and then close out. And then on my desktop I have my first generic workbook and my second generic workbook. And I'm going to go ahead and right click my second, go down and left click on Delete, and say yes, and send it right to the trash can. I'm going to double click and open up generic workbook again. You see my white cross? As long as I can see it, I'm going to click and drag to select a range. And everything within that range, all these DFs, I'm going to hit the delete key on the keyboard and get rid of it, then click off in a blank area. And then as I delete it, you'll notice that I have my undo button. So if I made a mistake of deleting something or making changes to it that I don't want to make changes to, just hit undo. And then if I say, well, actually I want to redo my changes or redo my delete, you can hit the delete key again, or just come up here and hit the redo clear button, which deletes it. Undo, redo. Okay, click off in a blank area. And then I have my Save As button, so if I ever need to make quick copies like my generic name, like we just did, click Office logo to Save As again. And you'll notice when I hover over Save As, it gives me more options. It doesn't mean that this button doesn't work, it just means that I can either use this button, or when I hover over it, gives me more Save As options. So for example, when I click on Save As, I can save it as an Excel workbook and click the drop down arrow here and save it as different other formats. For example, of an earlier format, so anybody who's not using Excel 2007, let's say they're using the old format 97, 2002 XP or 2003, I can select that and then go ahead and type in a name, click Save, and then I can send it to them, and they can easily open this up because it's an older version of Excel that I converted it or saved it to. Let me click Cancel, and then we click on the Office logo again down to Save As. See right there where it says Excel 97 2003 Workbook? Well, clicking that, when I click on it, opens up the same thing. It just presets my Save As type instead of me having to click on here and going and finding it. I'm going to click Cancel here. So again, when you click on the Office logo button, anytime you have any hover points, it just means there's additional features that it will set up for you, or you can just click right on the button itself like Print. It opens up my print setup so I can go ahead and make any changes to it and tell it how many pages I want to print and so forth before I actually click OK. I'm going to click Cancel, and that's a great segue because instead of coming to the Office logo button and coming down and clicking on Print, which takes 2 clicks, I'm going to click off in a blank area over here. And I'm going to I want to add the print button right to my quick access toolbar, so I just have to come up here and do one click. To do so, you can do it one of two ways. You can either, when in doubt, I usually tell my students, you can right click anywhere on the quick access toolbar and see how it gives me the same menu. I can customize the quick access toolbar here, and it pops open all these commands over on the left hand side that I could add to my quick access toolbar on the right. I'm going to click cancel. We'll come back here in just a second. Or, see that little down arrow to the right of the quick access toolbar? If I click on that, it gives me the most commonly used buttons, one of which is doing the spelling, print preview. In fact, if I click on the print preview, you can see it adds it as a little button up at the top that I can just click on, and it throws me right into print preview. But because Microsoft Excel couldn't find anything in here, there's no reason to print preview, so I'll click OK. Now that one click right here is a lot quicker than me clicking on the Office logo, going down to print, and then clicking on print preview. So it saves me some time when I can click off in a blank area and just come up here and click on the print preview. Click on the drop down arrow, there's quick print. Now the difference between printing and quick print is this. Let me go ahead and left click on quick print. It gives me a little printer button here. And I don't know if you can see it, but there's a little tiny green circle with a white check mark in it. Let me add the print button, and I'm going to show you the difference between quick printing and the print button. I'm going to right click on the quick access toolbar and come down and go to customize, which by the way, when I click cancel is the same as clicking on the drop down arrow and going down to more commands. Okay. Now you have popular commands over on the left hand side, but I want to click on the drop down arrow and go to all commands, and then you get a really tiny little scrolly here because there's so many commands. So it's alphabetized. I just want to click and drag this until I get all the way down to the P's. And there's my print right here. Now I have the quick print over here. The quick print would be over on the left hand side as well, but it'd be under the Q's because it begins with the letter Q, right? So I have my print. I can double click on that and automatically adds it over to the right hand side. And I can use my up or down arrows to move it around here on the quick access toolbar to set the order, like save's going to be first, undo, redo. But when I'm finished, I can go ahead and click OK, and it adds the print button. Now again, if you can see that, there's a little tiny difference between the two buttons. The quick print button, what that does is if I click on it now, shoots it right out to the printer. And what printer does it shoot out to? Well, if I hover over it, it says it's HP LaserJet. It doesn't give me that little pop-up that says, well, how many pages do you want to print off? Or is it just a selection? So if I hit that button right now, I don't get a chance to set my print options. But if I click on the printer here, print button, it gives me a chance to set up my print options before I actually click OK, and that's the difference between the two. I'm going to go ahead and click cancel and close out. And to get rid of any of these buttons here, I can just come up here and let me get rid of the quick print. I don't like that. I like to set up my print options before I actually print them off. I'm going to right click on that quick print button, and I'm going to remove it from the quick access toolbar with the left click, and it's gone. So right click to customize, and you want to make sure you right click on the appropriate button that you want to remove. And when you're finished, click off in a blank area. Oh, and by the way, you see this little dot here along the right hand side. Anytime I click on print preview, it likes to outline or put page breaks so I can see what's going to be printed in one page. So everything between the column A and I is going to be on one page, and everything over to the right may be on a second or third page. But you want to watch the later training videos on that. For right now, we're done with the quick access toolbar. Now to get started, we're going to create a mini spreadsheet of some data of the sales and expenses and profits of a company. To begin with, I'm already in a new workbook. It's called Book 1, so we know how to create a new workbook. Just open up Excel. Or you can come up here and click on the Office logo button, come down and click on the New button, and then say that you want a blank worksheet. You can either click Create or just double click on Blank Worksheet. If I double click on it, it pops me open in a new workbook, and you can see up at the top it's now Book 2 until I give it a name by saving it. And down at the bottom you can see on the taskbar you have Book 1. I click on that, and you can see it goes from Book 1 to Book 2. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on Book 1 and left click on Close, and it'll say, do you want to save Book 1? I'll say no. So now I'm in the second workbook, or the second time that I created or open up a new workbook. And again, when I save it, it'll change the name and I'll save it to a place somewhere on the desktop. So to start my data entry, I'm going to click in cell, let's say A2. I'm in the A column here that's in orange, and over in row 2, which is in orange. And the name box says I'm in A2, which is nice. It tells me wherever I'm at in case if like I'm way over here and I'm trying to line up the column M with the row 20. I mean, there's M20, but again, the name box will tell you. So I'm going to click in A2 and begin my data entry. I'm going to go ahead and type in months, and I'm going to hit the tab key. See, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go from left to right. I'm going to type in months, sales, expenses, and profits, and then below that I'm going to type in the months January, February, March, and then all the numbers in between, how much we made in January, how much the expenses were in profits. The reason why I'm telling you this is because when I hit my tab key, there's an interesting feature that's going to happen in Excel. When I hit tab, and let's say I type in sales, and I hit tab again, and then expenses. If I hit enter on the keyboard, is it going to pull me under the same column but on the new row 3 under C, or is it going to take me back to B or back to A? If I hit enter, boom, it takes me back to the very first column because Excel tries to keep things logical. So if I start in a cell, let's say over in E7, and I type in high, and I hit tab, buy, I hit tab. The moment I hit enter, it's going to go right back to the very first column where I started or began my typing. Now, if I don't hit the tab key and I just type in something, and let's say I use the arrow key over, more, and arrow key, and then I hit enter, it doesn't take me back to the beginning where in the column that I first started. And it goes the same when I use my mouse. So if I type in something here, use my mouse to click over here, and I hit enter, it's not going to take me back here. Again, it's only the tab key in Excel that when you use it and you hit enter, it'll take you right back to the beginning column or that first column when you started typing in. So I'm going to use my white cross here, click and drag and go up and left until I can select that range with all the text in there, and then just hit the delete key on the keyboard to get rid of it. So you can see why it's important for me to use the tab key, because I can type in months, sales, expenses, and then tab, profits. And then hit enter, and because I just started actually in the column C and typed and hit tab, it's going to go back to C, if that makes sense. Okay, then what I want to do is I got my column header set up. In fact, this column is for months, this column is for sales, that column is for expenses. So let me start typing in my months, beginning with January. I hit enter. Now, what if I make a mistake? You can see that my cursor is flashing in here. And let's say I didn't want February, I just wanted the abbreviation of February. Well, I can hit the backspace arrow a couple of times, right? And there's February, hit enter, and I'm done. But what if I made some mistakes in other cells? If I want to abbreviate January, I can click on it and either type over it, Jan, and hit enter. And that works. Let me hit my undo button up at the top so I can go back to where I was, January. Or I can do a couple other things. I can come up here in the formula bar, click in there, and then hit backspace a couple of times, then hit enter. See, it does the same thing, right? I'm going to hit undo again. And the other option you have is you can simply double click really fast within the cell, and you see how it plops the cursor in so it's flashing. Now I can go ahead and hit the backspace arrow or use my arrow keys to move around within that cell. And then if I move it just after the letter N, I can hit the delete key, because the delete key deletes what's in front of the cursor and the backspace arrow deletes what's behind the cursor. Then when I'm finished, I can hit enter on the keyboard, hit enter again, and in cell 5, let's do March. Now something interesting just happened. The moment I started typing the letter M, let me hit the backspace key a couple of times, and then we try again, M. You see what happens? The moment I type in the letter M, Excel tries to perform another logical step for us in this workbook. It's saying, look, I want to make it simple for you. If you have the same name in the same column, when you start typing, I want to come up with matches that resemble that. So the first name in the column here is months, and it's looking at this saying, look, I bet you're typing in the word months. It's like, no, I'm not. But if I was, and I wanted to type in months over again, you see how it finished spelling it out for me? Just hit the tab key and it automatically accepts it, shortens your work. A great feature about that is that if you didn't want duplicate data in the column, and let's say you're all the way down, you're typing in, and you get to row 30,000, you can't remember if you already typed months in that column, just type it in. If it starts filling in for you like it does here, then you know you got a duplicate there somewhere. However, you see how it starts typing it in for me? If I click off in a blank area, it accepts it. Let me type it in again. Months. Now how do I get rid of that? Well, just keep typing. This is supposed to be March, so I just keep typing over it and it replaces it, okay? Let me go ahead and hit enter. And what if I start typing in MA, and you see how it wants to fill in the letter R? And let's say I don't want R, I don't want that at all. You can hit the escape key, and the escape key just pops you back out of that cell and it starts over again. So you don't have to hit enter to accept it, or you don't have to keep typing to type over it. You want to start over again anytime you're in the middle of typing. For example, I'm in the middle. Just go ahead and hit escape. Clears it out for you. Again, anytime you get into trouble when it comes to formulas or functions or something as simple as typing in text, hit the escape key. It'll pop you right back out and it'll start over. Now what I want to do is I want to go ahead and select and delete those. And later on you want to watch the other training videos. I'll show you some fancier ways of deleting cells and rows. But for right now, I'm going to go ahead and click off in a blank area, come back here in cell A5 and type in MAR, and just keep typing so it doesn't add in months. And then when I'm finished, I'll hit enter. I'm going to hit enter one more time and type in totals, and that will be my totals, as you can see, for the next column for sales, expenses, and profits. And I'll just hit enter. Okay, now I want to click in B3, and this may sound foreign to you if you're new to Excel, but just remember you're in column B, row 3, so B3. And my sales is going to be 120. Now when I'm done typing in sales, if I want to do my expenses next, like let's say I'm reading from a piece of paper that my boss gave to me, type in 120, hit the tab key, and let's say the next column is expenses, and I'm reading in that, and that's 115. When I hit enter, it takes me right back to the sales column, doesn't it? Puts me in the February row, which makes it easier because if that way I can go ahead and keep typing and hit enter and do the 10 key without even looking at the keyboard to see what I'm doing, as long as I'm reading it directly from left to right on the printout that the boss gave to me. So I could simply say 195, tab, 154, enter, 230, tab, 125, enter. Well, congratulations, you now just created your very first spreadsheet. Now I know what you're thinking. It's like, well, how do I add up my profits and get my totals? Well, first of all, we just want to make sure you're able to enter your data into the spreadsheet here correctly. And before I take it a step further, I want to go ahead and save my workbook here, because right now something happened. I may lose all my work, right, because it's not saved. The title right now is generic workbook 2. So remember, if it's the first time I'm saving a workbook, when I click on the save button, again you can click on the save button up in your quick access toolbar, click on the office logo if you want to take the extra time to come down here and click save. It's going to ask you 2 questions. Where do you want to save it, and what's the name? So first, I would like to save this on my desktop. Now on my desktop I have an exercise folder. I'm going to double click on that because I'd like to save it in my exercise folder. Then I'm going to give it a name by clicking down here in the file name field, and then just start typing. It's highlighted in blue, but if you just start typing, it'll type over it, sales. Then when I'm finished, I can either hit enter. You see how it's highlighted or shaded around the save button? If I hit enter, it means that that's the hotkey, and it'll activate that save feature and just automatically save it, instead of me having to come down here and click on the save button. For right now, let me go ahead and click save. Let's say I need to create another copy and give it to my boss, or maybe my stockholders, and I want to fudge the numbers to make it look really good. So I'm going to save a separate copy and cook the books, as it were, to save a second copy and change the numbers around. Then you want to come up here. If I click save, it's not going to do anything because it already knows its name. See, up at the top, sales, and it knows where to save it. If you want to save a copy, click on the Office logo button and go down and do Save As. Now, I already added the Save As button to my Quick Access toolbar, so I don't need to come down here and click on Save As. I can click off in a blank area. And you see that little disc with the pencil? It's writing to it. Go ahead and click on the Save As button here. It's going to ask me the same questions again as if I'm saving this for the first time, except it's going to save it as a copy. It's going to copy this. It's going to copy it in the same place, but except down here, I'm going to put over here sales and type in 2. Because if I keep it as the same name, it's just going to overwrite the same book. And I need 2 different types of books. One book that really tells what's happening, and another book I can give to the investors. And I don't recommend doing this at all. But in any case, go ahead and click on sales, type in number 2, or just give a variation of the name. And then when you're finished, again, I could click on the save button, but because it's already in blue, it means that that's an active button that all I have to do, I'm going to move my mouse up here, is just hit enter on the keyboard, and it automatically executes that button. And you can see up at the top, it's sales 2 now. So if I go ahead and close out of my workbook, but not the program, remember in the upper right hand corner, you can close out of the outer X, which closes the whole program completely. And I'm going to come back here. Remember I saved it in my exercise folder. Double click on my exercises folder, and there's sales 2. Let me double click and open that up again. Now I can close out of the program altogether by clicking on the outer X, or I can click on the inner X. Keeps the program open and allows me to go ahead and either click on the Office logo to create a new workbook, or come down here and click on the Open button. Now when I click on Open, I want to open up a workbook that I was just working on, which was sales. Well, when I open it, it takes me to my Documents folder. Here you can see I'm in my Documents folder. But I want to go to the desktop and look at the views. I can scroll down here. Those are larger icons, aren't they? Well, I can click on my Views arrow here and say I want something smaller, like let's say in the list view, kind of small. Then I can double click on the exercises, and there I go. It lists everything in Excel format, both as XLSX, which is new to 2007, or just XLS, which is anything Microsoft Excel 2003 and older. As you can see, my little pop-up there, it says Excel 97 through 2003 workbook. So I can double click on, let's say, sales, and it opens it up. Now keep in mind when you click on the Office logo to go to Open, and if you're not quick enough, like let's say I also want to open up the sales workbook number 2, If I double click and I'm not quick enough, and I'm double clicking on the actual text here, if I don't double click fast enough, it's going to open up the text here and say, oh, you want to make a change or rename the workbook? And it's like, no, I don't want to do that. So I have to click off in a blank area. If you're not quick on double clicking, and that's as fast as you can double click, so it thinks you're always renaming the file, then what might be easier is to either double click on the icon here, so you don't have to mess with the text or thinking that you're going to rename it. Of course, you can always right click and go down and left click on rename. It does the same thing, doesn't it? It actually shades that text in for you just to start typing in anything. But if I get in trouble, don't hit enter, hit escape. Remember that escape key? It pulls me back out of my mistake and it reverts back to what it used to be before I made the mistake. So again, either double click on the icon, and again, if you just keep single clicking and you're not a fast double clicker, just select it and click open. That might be easier for both of us here. And then finally, if I click on the inner X here, or you can use the shortcut key, on the keyboard if you hold down the control key and the letter W, it'll close out of the workbook. Now it happened really fast. This used to be Sales 2. That closed out, but I also had Sales open, so it quickly went to that one. So if I hold down the control and W again, it closes out of that, just closes out of the inner window, and it doesn't close out of the Excel program as a whole. So control W is your shortcut key, or just click on the inner X here. Either one will work. The final thing I want to show you is when you're opening up workbooks, when you click on the Office logo, I can of course always hit open and click cancel. The shortcut is Control O, and that will open up. And it opens up the previous place that you were in, which for me was the exercise folder. Sometimes it's the documents. But once I start working the exercise folder, anytime I save or open up, it always goes back to where it was trained to go during this session of Excel, which was the exercise folder. Click cancel, or you can click on the Office logo button, and over to the right is the list of all the recents I've been working on. For example, up at the top I've got Sales 2. Then I have Sales, just regular Sales. If I click on Sales, boom, it opens it up, doesn't it? That's great, because then all I have to do is not remember where I need to go when I go File, Open. Let's see, was it in the exercise folder? Was it on my desktop? Was it in the new folder? Forget it. Just click cancel and just click on the Office logo button. And if it's one of the top, it looks like 20 recently used workbooks, just click on it and it pulls it up. Another thing I want to show you is when you click on the Office logo button, you have these little pins. Now eventually, if you work on 20 or more workbooks, so let's say Sales right now, I open it up and I work on a new workbook, and I keep opening up new workbooks like Christmas sales and so forth. This Sales, if I don't open it up, will keep getting bumped down and down and down as I open up more workbooks or recently used workbooks, all the way down till it drops off. Now what if I don't want it to drop off? You can see I put a little pin in it. If I come over here and I say Sales is important, I put a pin in this document, it means that as it starts to roll down, at the very least it'll just stay at the bottom. It won't roll off. So I can always come in here and click on it and it opens up. So if I go back and click on the Office logo button, I come over here and it's no longer important to me, then just unpin it by clicking on it. And it removes the pin, so eventually it'll roll off if it's not one of the top 20 most recently used documents. If you're like me and you've used previous versions of Excel, like older versions of 2003 or XP, and you've actually created workbooks that you're still using, you may want to consider upgrading those workbooks to the current version of Excel 2007. Because some of the advantages of using Excel 2007, probably the greatest one is it includes a smaller file size by up to 75% using a zip compression, which means it requires less disk space and also less bandwidth if you're sharing this across a network, and also less time to download if you're emailing this to somebody. Also, different data components are stored separately, which means if part of the component in a file is damaged, you'll still be able to open it. So there's more stability in 2007. I don't know if you had a previous Excel workbook, payroll, that you couldn't open, but if part of it was damaged, well, in 2007 you ought to be able to open up and work on part of it. But then again, with anything, if it's damaged enough, you won't be able to use it at all. But at least with 2007 you got a better chance than the older versions of Excel. So if I convinced you, how do you go ahead and convert your older versions of Excel to the newer version 2007, and how do you even tell that they've been upgraded or converted? Well, first of all, if you look up in the title bar of this workbook, you can see the name of the workbook is Sales. And then over to the right, or you have a dot, and then XLSX. I don't know if you can see that, but anything that's created in 2007 will always have XLSX. Any older versions, you won't have that extra X. It'll just be XLS. And this .xls is what's called an extension. Now what are extensions? Well, you can watch a training video on Windows Vista Level 1, and I go over this in depth with both Word documents as well. But what that does is it actually tells the operating system, like Windows Vista that I have here, or if you have Windows XP, what program is associated with this file that you're trying to open up. Because if you try to open up a file and it opens up the wrong program, like let's say I try to open up my workbook here in a Word document, that's not going to work, is it? In fact, you might get a bunch of garbled coding here, and maybe that's happened to you, maybe it hasn't. But in any case, you've got your name that you can identify with different files, and also to the right of this dot is the extension that the operating system can identify which programs to open up these files in. For example, let me take it a step further. I'm going to close out of the workbook and double click and open up the exercise folder. And in this folder, like any folders you have on your desktop, you may have images, you may have documents. Well, I have nothing but workbooks here. And out of all these workbooks, there's only one of them that was created in an earlier version of Excel, like 2003. Everything else was created in 2007. Well, how do I know? Well, first of all, if you can look at the extensions, you can see here XLSX, and all of them have it except Convert, which is XLS. Well, first of all, you're saying, I don't have that on my computer. I can't see my extensions. Well, by default, Windows Vista has these shut off. You can't see them. And probably for a good reason, too, because if you ever try to rename a file here and you delete the extension, well, I'll show you that in just a second. It can get messy. But first of all, if you can't see the extensions, let me show you how to turn those on. And you may want to watch the Windows Vista Level 1 training video, if that's a good plug for it. In any case, you want to come up here and click on your Tools menu and go down to Folder Options. Well, if you can't find your menu here, again, we cover that in Windows Vista Level 1, you want to turn that on. How do you turn it on or bring it up? Click on the Organize button here and go down to Layout and then go over and click on the menu bar. When I click on it, of course, it disappears, and I can bring it up again one of two ways. I can hold down the Alt key, which temporarily brings up the menu, okay, which again is a Windows Vista Level 1. Okay, never mind. We'll click off in a blank area. Click on the Organize and go down to Layout, and to bring it up permanently, click on Menu Bar, and see now it's up. So I can go to Tools, to Folder Options, click on the View tab, come down here, and do you see where it says Hide Extensions for known file types? Well, if I check it, let me click and drag the header of the window to move it out of the way, and I click Apply, boom, all those extensions disappear, which is probably what you see on your computer because by default, operating systems don't turn that on. Because again, if you rename them, like I'm about to show you, let me uncheck that and click OK, and all my extensions come back. So if I rename them by either right-clicking and going down to rename, or click off in a blank area and select it and hit F2 on the keyboard, again, this is all basic stuff in Windows Vista Level 1, you can go ahead and start typing, and notice how it just, in blue, it just selects the name of the workbook, and it doesn't include the XLS, because by default, Windows Vista doesn't want you to delete its file association with the program of Excel by deleting XLS, which I've done. Let's say, for example, I make the mistake and select all of it, and then type in a new name, and then hit Enter. It's going to say, what are you doing? I was associating this with Excel. Are you sure you want to do that? I go ahead and click Yes. And look, it changes the icon. It says, hey, I don't know what program to open this up in. Do you have any ideas? Well, maybe you got that from somebody who sent you a file and it was blank. Now, just because it's blank doesn't mean that it doesn't have an extension on. Doesn't mean you have to come up in here and turn on your extensions, right? It may mean that you don't have the program installed on your computer, because I may have all the extensions here and I have all white icons here, but I just may not have Excel installed on my computer, so there's no program to associate this file with because there's no program on the computer. For example, if somebody sends you a document like this or a file and it's blank, you can go ahead and call them back up saying, well, what extension is this? If they say it's QTW or something, it's like, well, what is that? And he says QuickBooks. You can say, well, I don't have QuickBooks on my computer. I can't open it up. And that would be correct. But I do know what this is, and we both know what this is. So I'm going to go ahead and right-click on it and go down and left-click on Rename. Type in Convert, if I remember it right, dot. And I have to be careful about the extension because it was an XLS, just that. It didn't have the extra X because it wasn't 2007, and hit Enter. And automatically Windows Vista identifies that as the program. That doesn't necessarily mean that that's the program that's right for that file, because you could actually add an XLS to like even documents or other files, and when you double click, it'll open it up and it'll say, look, I open it up in the program, and you get a bunch of different codings and stuff because you open it up or associated with it with the wrong program. So in which case you may want to change your extension again. Okay, that's probably a little bit more depth than you care about, but let me hurry and race on here. First of all, we want to identify whether this is a previous version of Excel or if it's a current version 2007 by extensions. Well, now that we settled that argument here that you may or may not have them on, The other is looking at the icon. I don't know if you can see this because my view is so small here, but that X right there is a little bit larger than all these other X's. In fact, let me change the views. If I click on the view arrow and I go to something large, there we go. See that X right there? It's a lot different than all these other X's, isn't it? These other X's are the new associations for 2007, so you can identify that, hey, this is an Excel workbook in 2007. Of course, aside from the extra X there, which this doesn't have. So there's two ways of identifying a workbook, is by the icon here from 2007 or the extra X that this workbook doesn't have. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the Views arrow and go down to List. It's easier for me to see this and click off in a blank area. Now before I convert this workbook, because it's really easy, I'm going to go ahead and shrink this window. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to click and hold down the Control key and then click and drag. And you see that little plus sign where it says Copy to Desktop? That's because I'm holding down the Control key and I'm left clicking and dragging this to my desktop. I'm going to let go of my left mouse button, let go of the Control key, and I have a copy now. The whole reason for this is because, well, they're copies, aren't they? So if I hover over this, what's the size? It's 20 kilobytes. What does it say on the note? That this is an older version, somewhere between Excel 97 and 2003. So now I'm going to convert the one in the folder here, and we're going to compare it to the older version once I convert this to a newer version. So let me go ahead and double click on it, opens it up. Click on the Office logo button. Now a couple things also you're going to notice in addition if this workbook was created in an older version and not in 2007 is first of all the Convert button. Also up here, see where it says Convert and then it has compatibility mode. This isn't its native format here, so it's working with you to at least open up older versions of Excel. So to simply convert this, just go ahead and click on the Office logo button, come down and click on Convert. Then I'll say, hey, this action is going to convert it to the current file format, which is Excel 2007, and this will allow you to use all new features of Excel and also reduce the file size. Some of the new features that are pretty cool include that you can shade your cells by bar graph, like for example 100 maybe be only a seventh of the cell here shaded in red, where 700 we're getting up there, it'll shade it all the way over to maybe about 70% or 3/4 of the way of the cell in different colors, and also use a variety of new color palettes. So instead of saying new features, it probably ought to say new cool features. In any case, what I'm going to do is go ahead and click OK. It says the conversion completed successfully. It deleted the old version, but now to use the current version, you have to close this out and reopen it up. Or I can do it for you. So do you want to close and reopen the workbook? Go ahead and click yes. It closed it down, reopen it. It's no longer in compatibility mode. It has that extra X, again, which stands for Extensible Markup Language, a new, more stable programming language for 2007. And then also you click on the Office logo button, there's no convert button here as well. So let me click off in a blank area, close out. And when you look inside the folder here, there it is. There's no extra convert.xls. It actually deleted it and replaced it with XLSX, the updated version. And look, the file size is 12 kilobytes, isn't it? Remember what the older one was? Let me come over here. And I clicked off in a blank area because if you don't click to select the window, like for example, if I come over here, and I try to hover over it, nothing comes up because this window isn't active. So if I click on it, make it active and hover over it, it gives me 12 kilobytes. So I click off, hover over this, 20 kilobytes. Wow, it's like 70-75% that I saved on disk space alone, which probably doesn't mean anything to me, but if I email that to somebody, they're downloading it, that makes a world of difference. We're all about getting things quick, aren't we? Okay, click off in a blank area, and I can come back in here and double click and open that. Converted just fine, close out. Of course, my older version, double click on it. It still opens up in compatibility mode because it's not 2007. So there's a few subtle ways you can tell if it's been converted or if it's in 2007 format or an older format. Okay, now let's say we want to convert this backwards. In the previous training video on converting to 2007, we now want to revert that and convert it from 2007 Excel back to, let's say, 2003 or an older version. Now, why would you want to do that? Well, not everybody, like let's say your coworker or friend, has the latest version of Excel, and you want to give them something that they can open up and that's compatible with their older version, like Excel 2003 or XP. So what we can do is we can save it from the current version XLSX or 2007 to what we have here, XLS, which is an older version, 2003. In fact, if I hover over it, it says 97 to 2003 worksheet. Now, even if you send them a 2007 workbook that has the extra X on the end, that's a 2007 format, they can still double click and try to open it up. The only difference is that when they try to open it up, they should get a little pop-up window that prompts them to download a patch file, so they can actually install on their computer and read your 2007 Excel workbook. But some people, maybe they don't want to install that on their computer or mess with it. So if you want to go ahead and convert this to an older version, let me go ahead and right click on this and delete it, send it to the garbage can, and let me double click on convert, open it up. Now this is such a simple format. I mean, previous versions of Excel have, bolded text and underline, so the format's not too crazy. I mean, I probably could just send this and just be fine. But you learn this in future training videos. If I select a range here and I do some conditional formatting with data bars, like I was just saying in the previous training video, you can actually have little bars within each cell. There's 700 cells that quarter, it's a little bit longer. So to convert this, let's go ahead and click on the Office logo button, because we want to do a Save As, or if I click off in a blank area, I already have the Save As button on my Quick Access toolbar. If I click on that, what I want to do is I want to come down in here. It's going to ask me two questions. Where do you want to save this? Well, let me do it to my desktop, okay? And I want to convert this from XLSX, which is 2007's format. Click on the arrow where it says Save As Type, change the type to 97 2003 Workbook. Now make sure you don't choose the template, because that says 97 2003. That's XLT. We want XLS. So hopefully you're hanging with the extensions here and getting cool with them. Okay. 97 2003. It's on the desktop. The file name's convert. I'm going to click Save and watch what happens. By default, Microsoft is turned on with the compatibility checker. It says, look, you got some things in here that older versions of Excel may not be able to see. The biggest warning that you want to pay attention is these features may, the operative word may be lost or degraded when you convert this to an earlier format. Do you want to go ahead and continue? Click continue. We're done. Once we're done, go ahead and close out. And there it is. I saved it on my desktop and it put it in the upper left hand corner. So now this is ready to email off to somebody. So when they get it, they can double click, open it up. Now because I have 2007, I'm not going to miss much by opening it up in 2007. But for those who actually open up in older versions of Excel, these bars may not be here at all. Now, I didn't have to continue with the conversion. I could have stopped right there and then gone through this, right? And then just clicked on the conditional formatting and say clear from selected cells or entire sheet, and then go ahead and save. That way you don't even have to mess with that when you convert it to a previous version of Excel 2003 or older. So at least that way you can clean up your formatting. For example, if I go ahead and close out of here, and I come back to convert, and I double click and open it up, and I go ahead and I again do some conditional formatting, some of the things that just aren't in older versions of Excel, I don't have to wait to save it, save it as Excel 2003 to previous version. I can actually run compatibility checker from my Office logo button, come down to prepare, and down and click on run compatibility checker. I mean, you still have the option to continue if you save it or click cancel, but at least this way you don't have to go through the save as or get to that point of converting over. You can check it right here through, again, the Office logo button. And then it'll tell you, it's like, hey, conditional formatting, get rid of it, or at least know it may be lost if you convert it. And then click find. It finds it for me. Or let me click off in a blank area, try it again. To prepare, run compatibility checker, find. There it goes, it selects it. Then I can go ahead and get rid of it by clearing it. Entire sheet, in fact, just clean it all up, save it or convert it over to an older version of Excel, XLS, and then go ahead and email it to your buddy. You shouldn't have any problems. Now, assuming that you know how to enter in data into a cell like numbers here or text, if not, you want to watch a training video on data entry. In this training video, I want to show you how to copy and paste and move text or numbers around within the worksheet. Take, for example, I have in the H column, well, if I click in there, H4 is totals. I can move that by simply hovering over the border. Let me show you. I have a white cross. When I move my pointer over the border, it turns into a four-way black arrow. Any border here, if I just hover over it. That means that I can now move the cell, the contents of the cell, into another cell by clicking down the left mouse button. And when I click it, the four-way arrows disappear. But have faith, go ahead and move that either over to the left or down or wherever, and then just let go. I'm going to hit undo, and then just click and drag that over to G4. Now that's one way of moving your data around. Another way is to simply cut and paste it. So for example, you can see here for my cells of the book Dream Notes in the US, for the date that we analyzed the data here, it was April 15th, and you can see down in the UK April 15th, but it's in the first column A. So to match these up, I want to be able to click in B2 and cut that and paste it into A2. And I can do that either one of three ways. I can either right click and go to cut, click off in a blank area, come up here on the Home tab in the clipboard group and click on the pair of scissors cut. Or I can, on the keyboard, hold down the Control key and hit the letter X. The moment I do that, you see those, well, it looks like marching ants, little black ants marching around that cell. That tells me that that cell is active, or it's ready to be able to shift the contents from that cell to another cell of my choosing. If I hit Escape, now remember, if you hit Escape anytime you get in trouble, it pulls you back out, it stops, reverts back. In this case, it's original solid black border around the cell. So once I have it selected, again, I can go ahead and right-click, left-click on Cut, come over here in cell A2 and then just right click and select paste. Or I can come up here in the clipboard group. Now in the clipboard group, if I click off in a blank area, you can still see that A2 is still selected. I can either click on the paste button or click on the paste arrow and get more options. For me, I'm just going to click on the paste button. Automatically it takes it from B2 and pastes it in A2 and the marching ants disappear. Okay, how about instead of cutting something out of a cell, we copy it? For example, I've got March up here in E4, and that's for Dream Note cells in the US, but what about in the UK? I mean, we want the March down there as well. I mean, I could type it down there, but instead I'll copy and paste it. Same thing, you can right-click to go to copy. You can either, well, click in the cell and come up to the clipboard and click on the copy button, or you can do Control-C, you can see the shortcut there, and that will also copy that cell. So select the cell, go ahead and click on the copy button. There's my marching ants. It's ready to be moved, or in this case, because we're copying, it's ready to create a copy of that to the cell of my choice. Come down here in E14, you can see I'm in column E, row 14, and then just go ahead and paste. And I can do that a number of ways. I can click on the paste button, I can right-click and left-click on paste, or I can go ahead and click in another cell and do Control-V as in Victor. That shortcut will paste as well. And you notice how many times I can keep pasting? I mean, that's an active cell. When you cut, like we did from B2 to A2, it was a one-time thing. But when you copy, the marching ants will continue around this until you're done pasting. Well, how do I tell it that I'm done pasting? Do I just keep clicking? Do the marching ants stop? No. But remember, when you're in trouble, hit Escape on the keyboard and you're done. So I'll go ahead, using my white cross, I'll click in this cell up here and drag to select a range here that includes the text and just hit delete on the keyboard to get rid of it. And then click off in a blank area. Alright, another way of copying and pasting that you didn't know about is that you can also click on, like for example, I've got totals up here for the US Dream Notes. What about the UK? I would also like a totals column header for this group of data down here. So to do that, sure, I could copy and paste it down here, but another way of copying and pasting is actually clicking and dragging. Now I know if I click and drag by hovering over the border, it moves the contents of that cell completely, so I'd have nothing left here. But if I hover over the border and hold down my Control key, watch what happens to that four-way black arrow. You see what it did? It changed into a little tiny black plus sign. Probably can't see it, but go ahead and click and drag with your left mouse button all the way down to G14 here. Then let go of the mouse and let go of the Control key, and you'll see that it actually moved a copy of it down here to the cell of my choice. So again, clicking and dragging moves it completely. Control, clicking and dragging on the border creates a copy. And I can hit Control-Z to undo those last two steps there, which is a shortcut for hitting the undo button. Finally, we're just not talking about cutting and pasting or copying and pasting cells here. You can actually do a whole column. So if I go ahead and I not only have Dream Notes in the US and the UK, but I also have cells in like Europe or South America, I can create additional by selecting the whole column, and then I can right click and say copy, and I can cut it as well, and then coming over here and making room for more data here by scrolling over just a bit into column P, and I can right click on column P and paste it. Like I said, I can right click and also cut it and actually paste it in column J. In any case, I'm going to hit delete while it's still selected to get rid of the totals of the content within that column. Again, if you ever get too far in a spreadsheet and you want to get back, instead of clicking and dragging, how about if you just do Control Home? It takes you right back to the first column in the first row, which is cell A1. The autofill feature is basically taking any cell that you select and filling it in continuously throughout the spreadsheet. So for example, I'm looking at January, February, March, and I want to continue the series to April, May, June, and July. Instead of typing it in, I can go ahead and click in cell E4, hover over the lower right hand corner, and you see when I hover over it, that little black dot, it changes from a white cross to a black cross, and then I can click and drag and you'll see there's April, May. It's continuing filling in that series beginning with March. If I go over far enough, too far, I mean it starts over again with January and February, but I'll pull back to December, let go of the mouse, it automatically fills in the rest of the series here. Pretty cool. Okay, so I can click on the little tag at the end and find some options like, hey, how about instead of filling in the series, I just want to copy March several times. Go ahead and select the option copy. I get nothing but March. Click on the tag again, you can go back to your fill series, or click on the tag, you get a few more options. You can either fill in the series with formatting or without formatting. It just means that if March was in bold, blue, and italicized, you can fill in the series or the formatting of that within the remainder of the cells or without it. I'll click off in a blank area. Instead of going left to right, I can also go up and down. So if I click on December, lower right hand corner, I can click and drag and continue the series beginning with December, depending on how far I want to drag my autofill handle to. I can go ahead and undo all of that here. A few other features you want to know about the autofill is that, let's say for example I want to type in a number here 1 and hit enter. Well, it's $1. But what I can do is I can click and drag the autofill handle and it repeats $1. Next, if I go ahead and click here and I type in 1 and hit enter and let's say 3, enter, autofill can also look for patterns and repeat the pattern. So what's the difference between 1 and 3? It's 2. So the next one ought to be 5, right? So if I click on 3 and just autofill, it's going to give me 3. Let me undo that. However, if I include both cells in the autofill feature, you see how the black border surrounds it, and I still get the autofill handle. If I click and drag, it's going to find the differences between these two cells as I click and drag, and you can see it'll figure out it's a difference of 2. And I can continue on down till, well, there's 1, 3, 5. In fact, it even got the formatting right. It realized that the first cell had a formatting of just number and the second cell of currency, and it alternated in between the two. So pretty cool little fill series here. Of course, if you want to get even more spiffy, you can go 1, 3, 12, enter, and let the autofill figure out the series with that. Select it, all 3 of them, and start clicking and dragging, and well, according to Excel, that's the perfect series here based on the first 3 numbers that we chose. So at this point you're probably saying, big deal, I may not use that. Well, it does become a big deal later on when I scroll back here and we start adding up the totals here for each column. You can add up one column here and be able to drag the autofill series over to the right, and it'll actually go ahead and automatically for you add up this column and put it here, and add up that column and dump it here. It can be very powerful, and of course we'll cover this when we start going over functions and formulas. When it comes to editing your cells, there's basically 3 ways you can edit them. For example, let's say I want to edit the cell I'm in F8. Let's say that $415 wasn't the correct amount that this employee made in sales for the month of April, and let's say it's something like $545. Well, at the most basic level, you can just click on the cell and then just type over at $545 and hit enter, and that works. Another way, if you just want to go ahead and change one number within the cell, like let's say we don't want to change the whole cell, $545, we just want to change, let's say instead of $545 it was $535. We just need to change one number. Go ahead and double click on the cell. When you double click, your cursor's flashing within the cell. You can then use your arrow keys on the keyboard and move it before or after the 4, hit the delete key, type in the number 3, hit enter. That works as well. Of course, this may have been easier for such a small number just to click on it and type in 535, right? But what if you get to the employee's social security number or a longer number within a cell and you realize that just one number is off, like let's say instead of an 8 it's a 5. I mean, wouldn't it be easier just to go ahead and change that one number instead of having to remember the whole number and retype it in again? Well, I'm going to double click and drag and select the 8, type in 5 and hit enter. To me that's a lot easier than having to recall this whole number and type it in. Now, not only can you double click to get the cursor within the cell, but once it's within the cell, if you double click again, it'll select the whole cell, then you can just start typing and it will type over it and then hit enter. And well, that doesn't look good, so I'll hit undo. But nonetheless, you can either click on the cell, type over it, or double click, and it selects the whole cell. I'll hit enter. Finally, you can actually click and select the cell, and then up in the formula bar, go ahead and add some extra numbers like 0.54. Make your changes there. Maybe it's not 535, click and drag. over the 3 and type in 4 and hit enter. Actually, the purpose of the formula bar, when I click on the number below, is it's supposed to display the formula or function. Like, for example, let's say that this cell right here is a result of a bunch of other cells that have been added up. Well, if it was, when I click on the cell, it would show the formula up here, the function, like B5 plus D5 plus C5, whatever cells that I've added up, and then down here would be the result of that formula. So you can come up here and change the formula and define what cells you want to add, subtract, or multiply by, etc. And you'll see this in the future training videos on formulas and functions. But for right now, if there's nothing up in there, it just displays the basic value of the cell. Of course, when I click on F4, there's no formula, it just displays the text. And here it just displays the number. Okay, one final thing to kind of kick this up a notch. I'm going to go ahead and click in cell A1, and let's say that Dream Notes is a trademark, and I want to put in the symbol-like letters TM. Well, to do so, I want to be able to get inside because I want to put that trademark just at the end of Dream Notes. So I can either double-click here and then, move my mouse over and click after the letter S, or hit Escape on the keyboard and come up here in the formula bar. That works just as well. And then click after the letter S. And then what I want to do is I want to come to the Insert tab, go over to the text group and click on the symbol button. I'm going to click on the subset arrow here. And I want to scroll down and look for letter-like symbols, which is TM for trademark. Go ahead and select it, click Insert, and you can see it inserts it right there. Looks good. Click Close, and when I'm finished, just hit Enter to accept it. Okay, this spreadsheet was created in the very first cell, which is A1. Let's say I made a mistake. I'm supposed to have the title of the region above here and then the actual regions that we made cells within. So if I crunch this all too close in the upper left hand corner, I have no room. I can actually insert blank columns, or I'm going to click on the row header, blank rows, above what I have here in cell A1. And I can do this one of two ways. I can either, when in doubt, right click on the column here, this whole column, the A column, and left click on Insert. You can see it shifts everything over to the left. Or by the same token, I can also, click on, you see that arrow there? That black arrow when I hover over the row header, when I click on it, it selects the whole row. Then I can right click and left click on Insert, and it inserts a row above whatever I have selected currently, which at the time was in A1, or B1 was Dream Notes, and then it just shifted it down. Which, by the way, for those of you who are new to Excel, let me emphasize that when somebody says click on the A column, usually new students will click in the A column. That's not on. Click on the A column, you click on the letter A here, which is the column header, the heading for this column, or the row header, which is number 11 if I click and choose to select the whole row. Okay, let's say I made a mistake and I inserted, or it doesn't look good, I don't want this extra column here, this space, or maybe the row above. Now if it's recently done within the workbook and I haven't closed out of it, of course you can always hit the undo arrow up on the quick access toolbar, right? Or if you save this and you open it back up, your undo's not going to be there. It's only during the current session that you're working on with your workbook, because the moment you close out, you won't get that undo arrow. Well, first of all, let me click on the A column so you can see it. When in doubt, right click on the A column, and then go down and left click on Delete, and it just pulls everything over to the left. Think of it this way. When you insert rows, or whole columns, when you're inserting, it pushes the data over to the right and down, of course depending on if you're inserting columns or rows. Anytime you're inserting, it's over and down. Anytime you delete, it's going to be up and to the left. It's going to pull the data that way. Again, depending on if you're deleting columns, which will pull you to the left, or deleting rows, which will pull you up. Let me show you another cool little feature. Let's say I need to insert 3 rows above my A1 here. Instead of right-clicking and inserting and right-clicking and inserting, I'm going to undo that a couple of times. I'm going to come over here and I'm going to click and drag and select the first 3 rows. See, there's my little black arrow. Once I see that, I'm going to click with my mouse and drag down, and you can see where it says 3R. That's the 3rd row. In fact, I can go down to the 4th row, let go, and then with those still selected, I'm going to right click on any one of these rows here, these row headers, right click, and then left click on Insert, and boom. It inserts as many rows that I had selected, which is 4. Cool. So I'm going to go ahead and undo that, or I can right click on those selected headers and left click on Delete. That works just as well. Of course, you do have the other option. I'm going to click off in a blank area here, and you can use the tab here, inserting your rows and columns. In fact, you'd think it'd be on the Insert tab, but it's not. It's on the Home tab. And it's over here in the Cells group, clicking on the Insert arrow, and you can see Insert Sheet Rows or Columns. I'm not inserting cells, I'm just inserting either rows or columns. So you can see where my cursor's at. It's in B4. So what's going to happen if I insert a row? It's going to be above the row 4. See? Inserts a whole blank row above it. So if I click in cell B4, and I click on the Insert button again, and let's do columns, You can see it shifts everything over to the right from originally what was in column B. It just pushes it over and leaves everything in column A. Go ahead and undo that. So to me, it's a little bit easier to right-click on these and insert than it is to click in a cell, come to my Home tab, go to the Cells group, and click on Insert. I'll leave that up to you. Now I have a question. What if I didn't want to insert a whole row or a whole column? Let's say, for example, I'm looking at the sales here for the US around in this region here. Instead of having January's numbers here, what if I wanted to shift everything here in this range over one? So I can open this up and maybe type in the actual person's names, because maybe, whoops, I need to type in their names next to their social security number. Well, if I made a mistake like I did up here, maybe I put this too far in the upper left hand corner and I want to insert some new rows, I can also insert some new cell ranges, and when I insert a range, depending upon what I selected, it'll push as many cells over. So for example, if I just select this and insert, I can actually just push everything that I selected here over, depending on, again, if I'm inserting columns or rows. So if I'm inserting a column, it'll push these guys over. If I'm inserting rows, it'll push these guys down, but just whatever I have selected. So for example, I want to select January and all their numbers and push them over so I can actually type here the employees' names. Now I could just select here and push the numbers over because the employees' names would go here, right? But if I just do that, then January is going to be stuck here and I'm going to have employees' names down below, and that's not going to make any sense. So I want to actually shift this whole range over one. To do so, again, when in doubt, you can always right-click the range and left-click on Insert. Instead of inserting a whole row or column, I get a new little pop-up that says, look, do you want to shift these cells, the range you have selected, to the right or down? Now if I shift them down, it's going to go down, and I don't want to do that. I want to shift them to the right, right? Of course I can do entire row or entire column, but that's not the point. I want to just shift the range. So yeah, I want to shift them to the right. It's already selected. Click OK. Boom, it shifts everything that's selected that's to the right of it over one. That's kind of cool. Then all I have to do is just start typing in Marte, and that looks great. So hey, even if my data is collapsed and I made the mistake and I need to insert more data, I can shift the range of cells that I selected over to the right or even down. In fact, what does it look like when I shift them down? Let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to go ahead and click and drag and select the range here and hit the delete key on the keyboard. And I'm going to select this range and I'm going to shift it down. Now what is this going to affect if I shift it down? If I shift it down, it's going to shift actually everything that's underneath it down as well, and it's going to affect this column as well, just shifting it down. Well, let's see what happens. Let me select it. And instead of right-clicking and inserting here, again, you can come up to the Home tab here, go to the Cells group and click on the Insert button, and we want to insert cells. Not rows, not columns, but cells. Of course, when you hover over it long enough, it gives you the pop-up. It gives you the shortcut Control-Shift equals. In any case, click on Insert Cells, and I want to shift them down. Let me click OK. See how that works? It affects everything below it. It doesn't insert a whole new row where it affects everybody here, but it just affects this column and it shifts it down by as many cells as I've selected, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it shifts that whole column down for as many rows that I have selected. That's affecting everything below it. Nothing above it, and not affecting anything, any of its neighbors next to it. So shifting cells doesn't affect the neighbors, it just affects the neighbors either directly below you or to the right of you, again depending on if you're inserting a column or if you're inserting rows. Now how do I get this back? Well, by the same token, I can click and drag and select as many cells. If I just select one cell and I delete that one and say Shift Up, so right click, delete, Shift Up, it just does one at a time, right? And that takes too long, so I'm just going to shift the remaining cells up by 4 cells by selecting the range 4, right clicking, deleting. Now it's asking, do you want to shift the cells left? No, I want to shift them up. Excel tries to be logical and tries to determine what your next move is, and it may not always be right. So that's why I wanted to make sure that I eyeballed this and, well, made the correct choice by shifting it up and not left. So click OK and it pops them back up. Then I can select this range here, equal amount of cells for the range I want to shift, and delete this column here to shift everything over to the left. And of course, instead of right clicking, which is my favorite, you can come here to the Cells group on the Home tab and also click delete. And you want to delete cells. You don't want to delete whole rows or columns, just go ahead and do, delete cells. Now do we want to shift them up or left? Just left, because we want everything over here pulled over to the left here, so I want to leave it the default, click OK, and it looks good. Finally, if you really want to get fancy, remember holding your Control key, you can select multiple ranges. Like if I go ahead and click and drag, then I hold my Control key down, and I click and drag here, and I click here, I click over here. You can go ahead and right click that, and then delete it, and shift the cells. I mean, this could be messy, right? If you shift the cells left, everything's going to be pulled over to the left and you're getting rid of these, and whatever's to the right is going to be filling or taking its place. So like I say, you can really mess this up. And it works the same way if you want to select a whole column here. Control click column F also, and column H, and also control click, holding down the control key the whole time, row 10. And then of course going ahead and clicking on the delete button here and delete sheet columns. Now notice it can't delete the sheet row because it's focusing on columns now. So in any case, I'm going to click off in a blank area. For right now, it's best to stick with the basics. Your simple inserts and deletes. So you've got a great big spreadsheet and you want to be able to go to a number and find it fast. I mean, with dealing with all these numbers, let's say you recall there was a number that was incorrect. Like Bob comes up to you and says, look, sometime in January, or I can't remember, but you put down $210.35. That's not right. It's actually something else. Well, there may be a lot of $210.35 in sales here. So to quickly find something, you can always use the shortcut key, Control F, and it brings up the Find window, or you can close out of that, come to the Home tab and go to the Editing group, and then click on the Find button, and come down here and click on Find. It brings up the same window. Now I notice the formatting here is in dollars, and that doesn't matter. And there's the $10, let's say 35 cents, so we'll go ahead and type in here 210.35, and then all I have to do is hit Find Next. Or remember, if you have a button that's got a little blue halo around it or an outline, that means you can use your Enter key on the keyboard, and it's just the same as if you actually clicked on the button itself. So I'm going to hit Enter on the keyboard and automatically takes me to it. So it looks good. So then I can close out of here, make the changes that I need to, and move along. Now let's say you have a bunch of numbers that are the same and you want to find and replace those numbers without having to find one, type over it, find another one, type over it, like all these $400. So to find them and instant replace all of them at the same time, again, you can come up here and click on the Find button. You can go to Replace, or let me click off in a blank area and do Control F and click on the Replace tab. Let me click and drag the window out of the way on its header here. And I'm going to click up here and replace Find with 400. Hit the Tab key, and let's say we want to replace all the $400 in sales, and let's say it was actually $415. So I can come down here and click Find All. And it actually gives me, I can expand this here a little bit, this window, it gives me the cell and the value that it found. And it found 1, 2, 3, 4. And there's 1, here the rest, 2, 3, 4. And I can click on those links down here and it takes me right to that cell, right? And then I can come over here and make the changes, but why not just go ahead and click Replace? I can replace that and it changes it to 415, or just Replace All. When it's done, it says, look, the remaining 3 replacements have been made because I've already made the first replacement, which as you just saw here, and so it only have 3 left to replace. Click OK. It's automatically updated. Now everything is showing a current value of 415, which is what I replaced the 400 with. And by the way, this will search more than just the worksheet you're currently working in. It can search the entire workbook. And this entire workbook so far consists of 2 additional sheets. So if you want to have it search the entire workbook and have it replace all the numbers, or go ahead and find them, because you can see here it says sheet 1. I mean, if it found this on sheet 2, or if you had another name for your worksheet like North Region or European Sales, or whatever you name the worksheet to, and you'll learn this in future training videos here, it'll actually give us the worksheet name here and give us the link we can just click on, and it'll take us right to that worksheet. So if you want to search throughout the whole workbook, then just click on the Option button here, change the within from sheet to workbook, and then click on Find All. And of course it's looking for 400. It can't find anything, so it says, look, I've searched the whole workbook including worksheet 2, 3, 4, 5, however many worksheets you have within your workbook here, and it can't find anything. Go ahead and click OK. And to take it just a little bit further, and I'm not going to go too far in this because we're still learning in level 1 here, but you can actually search by format. I can come up here and delete what I want to find and what I want to replace with. In fact, if I just come to the Find tab, and let's say I just want to find certain cells with a certain format, you can click on the drop down arrow here and click on Format, and let's say you have cells that are in currency, they have a different alignment to them, they have a different font, like maybe it's Arial or Calibri, or maybe it's bold. Let me click Cancel. You can select those formats, so it searched just those cells that contains those formats, like bold here. So let's go ahead and try that. Let me click on the Format arrow, do Format, and let me just look for anything that's bold, and I'll click OK, and I'll go ahead and say Find All. There we go. It found Dream Notes here, and if I come down here and click on the second link, it comes to Dream Notes down below, because that's in bold, and you can see it up here on the Home tab in the font group. That B for bold is highlighted in orange, telling me that it's currently active or using the bold font. And then of course I can come here to the Replace tab and say, look, I want you to replace the bold with, let me choose a format. Oh, let's do something colorful. Anytime you find something bold, let's give it something orange and click OK. And let's have replace all. Made the 2 replacements, click OK, and there we go, looks great. Now if I close out of here and I go, let's see, now I want to find a number. Let's say I'm looking for actually the totals in here. So I do Control F, or again you can click on the find and Select button. And I'm going to come in here, I want to find totals, or maybe just a number. Let me hold down the Shift key and hit the Home key at the same time, and what it does is it takes the cursor from the end and automatically selects it to the beginning for me, if you didn't know that shortcut. And that's in the word training video. We got all these little fun tips. Let's say it's the number 514, $514, which is right there, you can see it. What happens if I go ahead and click Find Next? Why is it not finding it even though I can see it right there? Well, when I click OK, you can see that it's still looking for the bold font. So it's saying, look, I'll find the 514 for you, but only if it's in bold. You see what happens in Excel? It retains or it remembers previous searches. So even when I close out of here and I click on the Find button down to Find again, it brings up the 514. Also, it brings up previous searches in the format I was searching for, like bold. So what I want to do is anytime I do a new search, make sure there's no formatting here. And to clear it, click on the Format button and choose Clear Find Format. Then go ahead and click on Find Next or Find All, and it takes me right to it, which looks good. Now if you want to see this used in another way, then you want to watch the training video on number formats. That will be a fun one for you. Now I've got my GoTo feature, as it were, meaning that you can actually go to a reference really quick without having to scroll. Let's see, all the way down here and all the way over to the right. I mean, let's say I've got a cell like Z20 or X50 that I want to go to real quick. Let me hit Control Home. You know how many rows are in here if you watch the first training video. I mean, there's over 1 million rows, and gosh, who knows how many columns. It goes over to XZX or something. But if you need to get to the middle of a spreadsheet because it's so huge, you want to get to it fast, well, you can come up on the Home tab and go to the Editing group and click on the Find Select and use my GoTo feature. You can use Control G, and let me click on the GoTo. It brings up this little GoTo window, which you can actually type in the reference you want to go to and click OK, and it'll take you right to it. You can see I've done this a couple of times already. It remembers the last cell that I went to, which is nice because if I need to go back to it again, like D11, just click OK and it takes me right to D11. Which is nice because, hey, maybe that's a popular place for me to go is D11, but probably makes no sense to put it right here if I'm just working within this range. Again, if it's something way over in column XZX or all the way down to row 1 million, I mean, that's going to take a while to scroll down there. A quicker way to go is to use my GoTo man here, which is my GoTo feature. Now I'm going to click on it again. You can see it's Control G. Let me click off in a blank area. Control G, or click Cancel, hit F5, the F5 key on the keyboard. It'll bring it up as well, which I find is quicker. And then I can type in, let's say, Z10. And then remember, if it's got a halo around the button, you're as good as gold if you hit Enter on the keyboard. You can hit Enter, and it takes me right to it. There I am, Z10. And of course, to always get back to A1, just hold down the Control key and hit Home at the same time, and it takes me back. Now, I'm tempted to give you a little teaser here because this GoTo feature is also important because you can actually create your own names for cells. So for example, I don't know what Z10 is. Maybe that's more cells, but not in the US or UK. Maybe that's in Europe. But you know, going to Z10 doesn't really tell me anything. So for example, what I can do is I can actually give that cell a name instead of just Z10. So first of all, I need to go to the cell. I'll hit F5, and then I'll type in Z10 and hit Enter. Takes me right to it. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here in what's called the name box. I'm going to click in it. I'm going to call it my Europe. Well, let me do _sales and hit Enter. Now automatically it's got a new name here. In other words, I can go ahead and use that name here to get right to the cell or know that this cell is referring to European sales. So Excel right now sees this cell not only as Z10, I didn't overwrite Z10, it still can recognize and go to Z10, but it also has an additional name that I can identify with, which is Europe Sales. So let me hit Control Home to go to the beginning again, and let me hit F5. Hey, there it is, Europe Sales. Now I know, instead of what the heck is Z10, I know that when I go to this, wherever it's at, and I click OK, it takes me right to Europe Sales, European Sales, which is Z10. Let me hit Control Home again. And let me show you another thing you can do. You can click on the name box and go right to European sales as well. Okay, that's too much information. This is actually supposed to be level 2 training. And the name of the video in level 2 is going to be Create Name Ranges. So you'll watch that, and if I don't have it out, I'll get it out soon. It's a good idea to check the spelling on your worksheet before you send it off to somebody. To do it's really easy. All you have to do is hit F7 on the keyboard, or you can come up here to the Review tab and come over here to the proofing group and click on Check Spelling. Check spelling complete. It searched the whole worksheet, didn't find a single thing wrong, which means I'm a terrific speller. Okay, thank you. Well, I'll click OK. Let's go ahead and make some changes. I'm going to double click in the February cell, and I'm going to delete the F and hit enter, do some misspellings here. In fact, usually Microsoft doesn't like the spelling of my name, which is Kurt. I think it'll be okay with Kershaw, but it doesn't like Kurt. So I can go ahead and click on the check spelling or just hit F7 on the keyboard. Pulls up a little pop-up window, and in the first word it comes to, it says it's not in the dictionary, it's Ebuary. Well, I got some suggestions for you, it says, and if you like those suggestions, go ahead and click on the change button. When you click change, it's going to take this and whatever's down below, like if it's Briary or February's, and click change. That's what it's going to do, it's going to update that. Of course, I'm not going to be able to see it until this window actually closes. Then what happens is it says, look, whatever cell you had selected, I started searching from that point down. You can see over here it was in row 5. So it says, look, do you want to go to the beginning of the worksheet up at the top and check as well? I'll say yes. Hey, it looks like it was okay with Kurt. Wow, that's amazing. Click OK, and there's February's, which is really annoying me, so I'll click undo. Okay, in this new workbook, what I want to do is I want to be able to add up the monthly totals for January, February, March, and get the monthly averages. So in this example, what we're going to do is we're going to start off with basic formulas. Before we can actually show you the shortcuts and all the quick ways how to add up cells, use functions, and so on, we need to start at the basic level. So getting started, this may seem like the long way only because it is, but at least later when you deal with complicated functions, you'll be able to navigate around pretty quickly. So the basic formula here is, again, I want to add up my January totals here for all the employees for the month of January. So I click down here next to my cell here, monthly totals. And when I click in there, what I'm going to do on the keyboard is I'm going to hit the equals key, and then what I want to do is I want to add up these cells. So the first cell, which is $110.25, is in cell C, and I go over here 7. So I'm going to type in here C7. Now you notice something happened when I started typing it in. Let me do the next one. I want to add cell C7, so I need to hit the plus sign on the keyboard, so there's equals C7 plus. For newbies, they usually forget to add the equals sign. You always want to make sure you add the equals sign with all formulas and functions. So C7, what's the next one? Again, I'm in the same column C, but I want to go down one to row 8. So I'm going to type in C8. Let me hit the backspace key. You see when I type in the letter C, you can see all the different functions down below that begin with the letter C, like the clean, the columns, the combine. I mean, there's many functions. This little fx, that means it's a function. I mean, right now we're just dealing with formulas where a function is, I guess I could say, a more complex formula. So right now we're going to keep on typing. We're going to ignore these little pop-up windows for functions because I don't want to use them just yet. And you can see I can move my mouse around. As long as the cursor is still flashing in there, I'm fine. In fact, if I start clicking outside, it's going to give me errors. So I'm going to click OK, and I'm going to have to come back here and continue. If I made a mistake, I can always hit escape and I'm out of there, right? So then I start over. Equals C7 plus C8. And you can see it's pretty cool. It actually starts putting little borders around it, blue. And the reason why it's in different colors, so you can actually tell what part of the formula is referring to what cell. So C8's green, it's referring to the C8 cell. Plus C9, and finally C10. When I'm finished, all I have to do is just hit enter on the keyboard and get out of the way with my mouse here. And you can see that the total here is $741.49. So if I click back in that cell, now you're going to begin to see the second feature of the formula bar. It actually shows me the formula within this bar here, what it's adding up, and then down, of course, in the spreadsheet it gives me the result, or the value resulting from that formula. So if I need to make some kooky changes, like let's say I want to go over and I'm going to come up here in the formula bar and change it from a C to a D. Of course, it's going to give me this annoying drop down, but when I hit enter, and I come back up and I click in there, and I click in the formula, you can see it actually shifts over one. If I make the mistake, I can always, come up here and delete it and change it back to C, or I can click and drag the border of the green and move it back over here, and you can see it automatically updates the cell from D8 to C8, which is just as easy to do. So when I'm finished, I can just hit enter again and I still have my numbers. Now another cool thing is that you can actually select the range here, and I don't know if you noticed this, but down on your window frame here in Excel, you have your status bar, which gives me the average, and the average of all those cells I selected is 185. Or $185. How many cells have I selected? A total number of 4. And then I have the total sum, which is $741.49. Well, in addition to that, you can always right-click on the status bar, and you can also find out what the maximum number is within that range. When I left-click on maximum, and I left-click on minimum, let me get minimum as well. I mean, that's fun. Click off in a blank area. Now I got some additional features here. So my minimum value within the range that I have selected is $110.25, which, hey, we don't have that many numbers to deal with. It's easy to spot. And then the maximum is $220. So that's pretty cool. You can always right click on this, and I'm going to left click to uncheck maximum and minimum and click off in a blank area. Now this is good if you just want to quick, click and drag and get your results here. But then I don't want to do that every time. I want some static numbers. I don't want to have to keep selecting it, going, okay, boss, 185. Let me select that. It's easier just to look at the numbers down below. But for a quick fix, if that's what you're looking for, you can always, of course, drag or hold down the control key after you selected a range and click here, here, here. You can drag. You can see it sums up the selected cells, gives me the total count of the cells I selected, which is 9, including the cell here, the white cell, and the average of all those cells. So there's a little spiffy bonus for you. Let's go ahead and continue with our formula. We're going to do it again. So I'm going to type in here equals. Now what's going to make this one different? It's not going to be in the C column, is it? You can tell I'm in the D column. So I'm going to type in D. What row? It's going to be 7. 7 plus, and you're doing it right, that after you type it in, when it outlines it, I mean, if the outline is way over here, okay, you really need to update that and click and drag it over here, or just delete the column here and change it back to D. D8 plus D9. When I'm finished, hit enter. Looks good. The first shortcut here is to be able to, instead of typing this again here for March and then April, all you have to do is click in the cell. Remember the autofill training video? If you don't remember it, you may want to watch it. But right here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hover over the lower right hand corner to get my black cross, which is the autofill handle. And I'm going to click and drag to the right and let go. And boom, it automatically fills in the numbers for me. How does Excel know how to do that? What it's doing is just basically copying and pasting the formula that you have in here over into the next adjacent cell. And again, Excel likes to think logically and tries to figure things out for you. Now, it seems like the majority of times it does a pretty good job, but sometimes it doesn't. In this case, it did a great job, because what it did, it says, look, I'm going to copy this formula here, and I'm going to, when you drag the autofill, I'm going to automatically paste it in here. However, when I paste it, I'm going to update it and shift everything over. So you can see right here, it's now referring to the E column. When I click on the formula, there's the E's. And it kept it in the same row. E7, E8, E9, and then I copied it over here, and it changed the column to F. So it's pretty cool that it can not only copy and paste the formula, my original formula, but automatically update it for me when I drag across and use the autofill handle. So that can save tons of time. In fact, let me go ahead and hit undo a couple of times here, or just once because it was the autofill that I stretched it across, and let me go ahead and select, let me select this cell right here, and let me copy and paste it over here. Now if I copy and paste it, is it going to just copy and paste the value or the formula? I'm going to select it. I'm going to come up here in the Home tab in the Clipboard group and click the Copy button. Come over here, in fact I'll do it in cell F12, and then I can right click and left click on Paste. That's a different number, isn't it? Well, there you go. It's actually pasting the formula, not the value. But what if I didn't want the formula? I just wanted the value, $741.49. Well, you can click on the drop-down options here, and you can select just values only. Now, when you have the cell selected, you can see there's no formula up here. It just gave me the resultant of this cell here, just the value, which can come in very handy. Now, this may be a little bit too much, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit undo here. And of course, remember, when you get marching ants and you're in trouble, always hit the escape key on the keyboard and it will get rid of it or pull you out of that situation here. Just keep in mind that when you use the autofill handle, it's the same as copying and pasting. It's just easy to click and drag. Let me show you another way of doing this. I'm going to hit undo. You could, of course, come over here and click in the cell and hit equals. And instead of actually typing it in, you can just go up and click on the cell that you want. And before you click on any additional cells, you need to define if we're going to do subtraction, addition, multiplication. So you want to hit the plus key on your keyboard and then click, plus, click, plus, click, and then hit enter. Again, I still like the autofill, click and drag with the black cross. Okay, let's do our monthly average now. So I'm going to click down in cell C13, just adjacent to my monthly average cell. And what I want to do is I want to find the average of this. Now, of course, I can click and drag and select this and then come down here and go, oh, the average of it is $185. But I want it as a static number down here. So what that means is I need to get the total of this and divide it by the equal number of cells that I have selected to get the average of those range of cells that I have for a total here. I can either do it one of two ways. I can create a formula that just says, look, go ahead and add up all this and then divide it by 4. But since the total is already here, put a formula here, it just says equal this and divide it by 4. So let me come down here, hit the equals key on the keyboard, and then go ahead and click on the cell C12. I don't have to type it in. and then hit the divided by key. Now the divided by key is actually a / on your keyboard, so look for your / and then type number 4 on the keyboard and then hit enter, and there's your average. I mean, it's the same, 185, right? So if I select this, it gives me the average 185. So there we go. Now here's where it's going to get a little bit more fun. I'm going to go ahead and click in the next cell and get the average here, but I'm going to do it differently. I'm going to hit equals on the keyboard, and I'm first going to add all these up. I know it's a lot longer, but I want you to see and start getting a feel for the formula. This one I'm going to introduce you to the order of operation. I'm going to hit equals. I'm going to hit the open parentheses. I'm going to click on the first cell here. I'm going to hit plus, click on the next cell, plus, click, click. Then I'm going to close my parentheses here and then hit my /, which is the sign for dividing by, and hit number 4 on the keyboard and then hit enter. Now is that true? $191.69? Well, I can click and drag and look down here for the average, and it is. Now what just happened? Well, when I click on the cell here, you can look up and check in the formula bar for yourself. When you're doing your formulas, is it saying, look, anything in parentheses here I want done first. So the first thing is I want you to add up all these cells here, and then when you're done with it, go ahead and go to the outside of the parentheses and perform the next calculation, which is divided by 4. I'll click off in the blank area. Now again, for those of you who are just using Excel for just basic math, this may not apply to you, but if you start getting up into more detailed functions and formulas, then this will come in very handy. But for me, hey, this is just a simple part of the training video right now. I'm just going to go ahead and click and drag the AutoFill handle and drag it over and be done with my work and call it good. You can check it for yourself. It updates to the E column. Click over here, updates to the F column.